spinning up.
Oh, okay. That was a preemptive.
We are live. Hey, hi, Jackson. Let me just present you real quick to everybody that's watching. Jackson has worked at Amazon. He is a smart contract auditor. He now sponsors junior auditors, and there's a whole lot of other stuff that I want to touch on. Like this man has done so much. He even started a startup. A lot of stuff. We're gonna try to touch on as much as we can. Hi, Jackson.
Hey man, yeah, thanks for the intro. You make me sound way cooler than I really am. Yeah, that junior auditor thing was we were just talking before we went live that like lately I've just been sort of like shit posting. I haven't been like trying to promote myself, but somehow that's ended up working much better. So yeah, I mean just like I randomly will just like send tweets out and then like either they'll go gangbusters and people will like really engage with them or they won't. And then that will sort of dictate, and I'll just sort of keep pulling on that thread, going, oh, people are interested in this. Like, what about this? What about this? And you just keep taking it to its logical conclusion. And pretty soon you end up giving people money so they can be smart contract auditors. It's wild.
The
The internet's
natural
weird, man.
progress of things is to post about audits and then eventually fund people. That's the natural.
Hopefully, I mean, that would be cool. I think if we can get more people, like I think I tweeted like a couple weeks ago, I was like, how many people, because I get so many people following me every day and I'll like click through their bios or whatever. I was like, I wonder how many of these people with security in their bio are just
A lot.
LARPs. They're not actually doing any sort of security stuff. And somebody commented under that. They were like, but there's like worse things to be LARPing about, right? And I was like, that's actually a valid point, right? Like at least they're not LARPing about day trading or drug dealing or whatever, right? So yeah, I think if we can I've seen it on like Instagram. There's like this whole people are like faking that they're on private jets or whatever, right? For day trading, and you're like, this is all they're
Day
trying to sell
trading,
day trading courses or whatever. Yeah.
there's a lot of
So
that.
I'd rather people be LARPing that they're security people because at least it's something valuable to be aspiring to like keep people safe online or whatever. So
Yeah, that's the thing too. I noticed the trend for the past few months. There has been a trend on, at least on my timeline, where a lot more people are interested either in AI or smart contract auditing. But just like you said, it's at least this is productive. It's better than just the day trading or drop shipping where they add no value. This is something.
totally, totally.
This is because ultimately, at least you're left with some software engineering skills.
And it's a positive outcome. Like if you're successful as an auditor, you're providing a incredibly valuable service,
Right.
probably higher than what you're actually getting paid, right? Like the fact that if you find a bug on Immunify, they're only paying you like whatever 10% of the payout of the bounty.
Yep.
You know, you technically, if you were malicious, you could just go steal all the money and be done with it, right?
It will be hard to erase the trace.
Now that they've sanctioned Tornado Cash, but pre that, yeah, I think you probably could have gotten away with it, right? You could technically deposit the money into Tornado Cash in the same transaction you pull the hack
There's
out. But yeah, I
also
mean,
there's always also the
go.
question if you steal like $5 million from some protocol, okay, you put it to Tornado Cash. Let's say you remove that trace, but now you have to justify the $5 million to your local tax authorities. So
Yeah. Or the exchanges, like somewhere you're going to have to move it from crypto to fiat, right? Yeah, and then at that point,
at that
I
point,
think I think you could get away with it still, but I'm not malicious, and so I don't even have a thought experiment.
I
There's a really
think,
good podcast. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Darknet Diaries.
yeah,
But he walks through the whole process of like how the North Koreans are actually washing the funds that they're getting from a lot of these hacks that they're pulling off in crypto.
yeah, but it's like I am assuming if North Korean security authorities find about it, they're gonna be like, okay, give us like 3/3 of it, 2/3 of it, and fine, do it more, please.
In this case, it's actually the North Korean government themselves that are sponsoring the hackers, and so they're in on it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's basically like I would say even if you're completely unethical, still don't do it from a pragmatical reason
Yeah.
because it only takes getting caught once to go for like 10 years to prison, and at that point, no amount of money is worth it.
Are you familiar with Avi Eisenberg?
No, not at
He
all.
got he was the Mango Markets hacker. Do you remember that
Oh,
hack?
okay, yes,
Was
I
a
know
smart,
about that.
yeah. Yeah, it was that was like in all the news because it was so sort of
How?
comical, right? Where he took their tokens and like voted on their governance so that he didn't have to pay
Oh,
anything
yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What
Anyway,
was?
he
How did they
eventually
find
got
out
caught. He got
about him?
arrested. Yeah.
Oh yeah. How did they find out his name?
He was tweeting about it. he did. He kept calling it a profitable trade or whatever, right? So he was saying, "I didn't
Wow.
hack anything. I just figured out your market and like managed to exploit the market." And everybody was like, "Market manipulation is just as illegal as like
It's not.
hacking or whatever." Right? So, yeah, but it's
I,
still illegal.
it's illegal, but it's not hacking. I see his argument.
Yeah. So that's why he was like tweeting about it and whatever. He was. I was telling somebody recently. I was like kind of bummed out they wouldn't like let him take his phone into jail or whatever because he was like super entertaining tweeter.
I wonder how much is he looking at? Avi what? Avi, what's his name?
Avi Eisenberg. I wonder if his
Eisenberg.
Twitter account's still up. Still up. It's still
Avi
up.
Eisenberg stuck in U.S. custody. He's probably looking at a long time.
Yeah, he got arrested in Puerto Rico, I think, and presumably they're going to make him pay all the money back. I would imagine.
Yeah, he's if he has it.
I think he does because he was talking. I think I saw somewhere he was saying like the reason he's trying to stockpile all this money is like so his kids can be financially free or something. Like every criminal sort of talks themselves into why that they're
Yeah,
not doing it for themselves and they're doing it for their kids
the
or whatever,
police.
right? It's like, yeah.
It's
Anyway,
it's it's perfectly true. Like not a lot of people know this about me, but my father's been in prison too for
really,
some.
wow.
Yeah,
What was that like?
it was especially in Romania where the culture is very different to the US. Like in the US, if you are a rich criminal, you are like the worst. In Romania, if you're a rich criminal, you're like the boss. You're like the best. You're like a hero,
Yeah,
so to
I was just watching a Vice documentary about Andrew Tate. He got arrested in Romania, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So right now he's considered the boss. I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, and essentially everybody thinks, oh yeah, just because he's rich, he's gonna just bribe his way out of prison. And
Really?
there's a chance of that too.
Wow. That
But
would be
it's just the
crazy.
culture. It's just the culture here. It
He
is changing.
was Tate was saying that. I think he was saying like that's why he moved to Romania because he was like money speaks here and I can kind of like do whatever I want and get away with it.
He definitely has exaggerated how corrupt it is. Because I've
That's
watched some
good.
videos. He has exaggerated a lot. He speaks about corruption in Romania as if like it was the way he is speaking like 20, 30 years ago, but it's not like that anymore. It's definitely changing for the
That's good.
it's a good direction.
I'm glad to hear that. So I
Um,
don't know. How much you want to talk about your father? I don't know if we want to really get into that, but I'm very
um,
curious about that. Like, how long was he in for? Like, what? How old were you when it happened? Like, did it affect
I
you
was
psychologically?
so the first time. Okay, so we're talking about multiple stories here. I'm gonna do my best to go really, really fast because this interview is about you, not about me or my father. But just to go over it really fast, he's done prison twice for stealing and fighting before I was born. Then
Crazy.
I was born. He got his act straight for the most part. When I was 14, he got arrested once for something which I'm personally not very clear exactly what it was, so I'm not gonna go into that story. But I literally at 14 had like cops with machine guns go over the fence into my courtyard and
Holy
then
shit.
basically search through the whole house, which was very interesting. And also they stole my PSP control, my PlayStation controller. They literally stole my PlayStation
That's
controller.
the thing the 14-year-old remembers. It's like, dude, now I can't play PlayStation anymore.
Exactly. No, I had two controllers because I had friends come by, and then they stole one. Now I only have one. Can't call my friends to come over anymore. And that's when they arrested him once, but he was proven innocent at that particular time,
Oh, awesome.
thankfully. And when I was 18, he got arrested and imprisoned for attempted bribery for for a sentence of 4 years, out of which he only did like 2.5, because that's kind of how it works in Romania. If you're given 10 years, you're only going to really do like 6.
Yeah, I
Um,
think even in the US, like sometimes if you like a good behavior or you get different lawyers or whatever, you can usually get out a
yeah,
little earlier than you're actually.
I mean, I think that's something that is very interesting, because it's like, do you want this person to go out early and not be fully punished, but also maybe they learned their lesson,
Right.
maybe back on the right path. And also, it's expensive to imprison people.
It is?
I mean, they get food, they get housing, they get
Oh,
heating,
right. Yeah. You're
and
saying
they
it's a yeah, it can be kind of a net pot. I've heard of like cases like this is how bad homelessness is in the US right now. I've heard of people like homeless people committing crimes just so they get thrown in
oh,
prison and they can like eat for that day. It's like bonkers, man.
it's insane. It happens in Romania too, although homelessness is much less of a problem here. Where are you from in the US?
So right now I live in Utah. That's kind of where at least that's where I went to college, finished high school. My dad was in the military when I was growing up though, so we moved around like every 4 years, lived in a bunch of different places. But yeah, I just very recently, actually last year, moved from Seattle. I think you mentioned, you've watched the interview with Andy. I talked about working at Amazon, the HQ of Amazon's in Seattle. So once I left Amazon, I was like, I'm fully remote at Robinhood, and then also obviously auditing's fully remote. So decided to move back to Utah once I was done at Amazon.
I'm curious, how did moving around as a youngster affect you?
I think it was a net positive in my life because it allowed me to make friends easily because I always had to do that. And so it just became like second nature that like if I ended up at a new school, I could find some people to hang out with and make friends with. And then I think it also gave me a sense of like many different cultures. There's kind of a bit of a hegemony of culture here in Utah. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the Mormon culture is like it
Oh,
basically runs the entire state in Utah. And so when I moved here, kind of as an adolescent, I had all this background of like how other people kind of live their lives, and I could kind of bring that to bear and use that to kind of deal with the hegemony in some sense. And then I also think I never really got too attached to like uh, things, if that makes sense, because when you're moving, you're kind of like tossing those things out, or you're losing them in the move or whatever. And so I care less about materialistic things, and like even my living quarters are sort of irrelevant to me. I think I talked in the interview with Andy that I used to be a musician before, or maybe I didn't mention that, but I was a musician before I transitioned into computer science. And so there you're like living in a van, and like I had an RV I was going from place to place with, right? So yeah,
so
I just got used to like kind of being on the road and like moving around all the time. So it doesn't bother me when I have to do it.
this is something that I'm kind of fighting with, because this year I want to start traveling more, because literally for what, I'm 25, for 23 years out of 25 years of life, I have lived in the same small town. And it's a nice town, but like, aside from holidays, I never really left in college, which I never really finished. But that's a different story.
You,
Um,
you Yeah, I mean, like I think you've got the benefit of being in Europe, right? Where it's like, okay, you could take a train and be
no,
wherever, and
no, that's
really,
no, not at all. That's the illusion that you get because you probably have a lot of Western European friends.
interesting.
They do have good trains. They can get around. I can't.
Why is that?
Eastern Europe has really bad train systems,
Bummer.
like slow and shitty.
So you
E-
could take a flight though to like a closer
Yeah,
country and then get onto the faster rail system or something like that.
definitely,
Interesting.
definitely. But then again, like even you in the US, everybody thinks as the US is a single country, but the more I talk to Americans, I realize no, these are very different states. It's the
Oh,
same.
totally,
It's the same as Europe. Because
totally.
like some person from Texas is going to be totally different than some person from
Yeah.
California. Just the same, somebody from Italy is going to be different from somebody from Germany.
I think that's even compounded in Europe, though, right? Because there's different languages, right? Whereas at least in the U.S., primarily people all speak English. But yeah, the cultures are extremely different. Like the way that the cities are set up are extremely different. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think by and large people assume that in the U.S. we're all Americans, but I mean, you see it in our political system, right? Where there's like all this controversy. Every time I was just complaining to my wife the other day that like every time somebody gets out of office for whatever reason, the other party decides they need to sue the person who's leaving the office for classified documents or whatever. It's like it's getting out of control here.
It's no, I think it's crazy everywhere because I've been just looking at a lot of countries because I kind of want to. I don't want to relocate full time, but I want to relocate half of the year for tax purposes.
Mm,
And I'm looking at different countries, and everywhere is crazy.
yeah.
It's all bad, so to say.
I yeah, when you first brought this up, I was thinking you might do like the digital nomad thing or something like that. Have you considered that?
Yeah, but it's expensive.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
really
But
expensive.
you're a programmer, right? So you could pick up a like a fully remote job, and
I do have a
I
fully. I
mean,
have yeah, I have a
yeah,
fully remote job, but it's still like coming from hey, I never paid rent or no, I
yeah,
don't
true.
now to now I have to pay for short term rent, which is much more expensive than normal
Yeah,
rent.
true, true.
That's bad. It's going to be a significant portion of my income, and also I'm also taking care of my mother and my sister, so it's not
Mm,
just me on a software engineering income because maybe that could
right.
make it. But yeah, I mean
I mean
I'm gonna.
that is one of the benefits of Romania, right? Is like extremely cheap to live there, right? So you're probably banking quite a bit of cash if you're
That's also questionable.
really.
I'm throwing a lot of shockers at you today, and I'm really not doing my interview outline that I set up, but that's
Yeah, we
fun.
can.
We're having fun. We're having fun. It's cool. It's like Romania is this place where it's very unequal. So
Mm,
yes, the average person makes less than $1,000, and so you're thinking, oh, if you're making even $2,000 a month, you're doing great. And to a certain degree, yeah, you're gonna be comfortable, but you're not gonna live great. You're not gonna do much. The average person, especially now after the inflation of the past few years, the average person is in deep shit, for lack of a better nomenclature. It's
interesting.
awful. Like uh, there's these cakes in Romania called kozonak, and it's like a sweet little bread with some jelly in it. It's a very nice dessert, but it's nothing crazy, right? Nothing fancy. It doubled in price over the last 1 year. It's insane.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, so everybody's complaining about inflation here in the U.S., but I'm like, the thing that the U.S. has going for it is it's got the world reserve world reserve currency, at least right now, and so we're still somewhat shielded by a lot of the volatility in like global markets and stuff like that, right? And so everyone's complaining about inflation, but you're like, if you look at some of the other countries around the world that don't have this massive economic moat around it like the US does, they're hurting like substantially worse than Americans are when it comes to inflation.
Yeah, it's really awful. Imagine that the minimum wage in Romania is like $400, and
You're talking about per year or per month?
per month. So
Okay, I
over a
was like,
year it
dude,
would be
what the
38.
hell?
And it's
Still, I
not
mean, still that's crazy, but yeah.
if you happen to have not inherited like an apartment from your parents, which a lot of people do, or not live with your parents, and you're trying to live on the minimum wage, it's literally
Forget
just
about it.
rent, maybe heating, and just the shittiest food you can find. It's it's awful, really.
Hmm.
And to a degree, I am super shielded from it because I have a remote job. I'm getting paid in
Right.
US dollars. So to me, it doesn't really affect me. But I'm looking at all the people around me, like not all the people, but like a good portion, maybe 20, 35% of the population, and they're really doing like they really have a hard job staying alive.
Yeah, I think the same thing's happening in the U.S. right now, unfortunately. Again, to a lesser degree, probably than in Romania, but
It's
it's sad.
it is. It is. It's bad, especially like I heard it's really bad in Turkey because I have a friend who is doing import export from Turkey.
Their inflation's gone out of control, is what I've heard.
That's insane. That one is insane. Venezuela, I think too.
Oh, Venezuela's been bad for like a decade. It's not necessarily the global economy, but yeah, I mean, I was just reading, I think it was a Reddit post or something about this where somebody was asking for help. Like, how do I man? Or they were talking about, maybe it was a different currency, and a Venezuelan came in and was like, here's what you need to know if you're gonna, try and survive through an inflationary period or an inflationary currency. And it was like, spend the money as soon as you get it. They had a whole bullet of points of stuff, and I was like, they I think they'd even posted a receipt, and so I converted whatever currency that was getting hyperinflated into US dollars, and it was like less than a cent, and I was just like, that's
Spend
insane. I
the
can't even imagine.
spend the money. This is super interesting. Spend the money as soon as you get it. This is literally the culture in Eastern Europe. Spend the money as soon as you get it. Is what
If you
it
Yeah,
should
if
be.
you live in an I mean, this is the whole point of inflation, right? The reason why the central banks do this stuff is to sort of like juice the economy, because money changes hands more quickly, right? So you're by sort of devaluing your currency, you're forcing people to act economically versus like taking the money, saving it, and receiving a risk-free rate on it or whatever, right? So they're doing that for a reason. It's just that they're letting it get out of control, right? Once it gets out of control, there's no stopping it, which is why the Fed in the U.S. is so concerned by it and is, willing to drive the uh, American economy into a recession, because there's no once the cat's out of the bag with inflation, it's done. There's nothing you can do to bring it back.
Yeah, yeah, nothing. It's done. That was actually thinking about the subject of just the culture of Eastern Europe, of how we generally default to spending stuff as soon as we get. You, I think you tweeted something about how you hate luxury, and
Yeah, I know it's a controversial opinion.
I don't think it's so controversial in Western or especially Northern Europe. But if you tell like a Romanian guy, "Oh, I did not buy a new car as soon as I got my first high income job," you're insane. It's because it's just the culture of
I
how
did.
people. Yeah, go ahead.
I said that to. I first made that statement. I remember in a conversation. I was carpooling with some guys to and from the office at Amazon, and I remember making that statement, and everybody in the car disagreed with me. So that's why I thought, okay, perhaps this is a controversial statement, but I just think that, I guess because I am a capitalist, I feel that capital should be used for the things like the junior auditor thing that I was doing, for example, right? It should be used to take risks in order to allow people to make economic decisions that they wouldn't otherwise make for the betterment of humanity. I think that's why capitalism exists. And when you take that and you're spending it on things that are of less utilitarian use, you're sort of perverting the signal of capital in the market in a sense. But again, I know people are like, I had another conversation with a really good auditor about the same thing, and he was like, well, technically, like, value is in the eye of the beholder, right? And so if a luxury good brings you happiness or whatever, right, then it served its purpose, and people should be allowed to do that or whatever, right? So I understand like the arguments against why I feel that way, but I
I
still
don't
feel that way.
think. I think there can be a balance. Like if you're spending the last of your money on luxury goods, you have an issue. But if you're investing and you're giving to charity and you're doing good stuff, and then on top of that you indulge in a bit of a guilty pleasure, I think that's okay. I can
I
take
had
that.
a I We were talking about these headphones before the call started.
Yeah.
I had a hard time even buying these things because I was like, is this a right use of money or whatever? But yeah, I just figured, utilitarianly speaking, right? Like that, I spend a lot of time on calls listening to music while I'm coding, whatever, right? So then I sort of justified, okay, it's okay to buy high end headphones, but
And
I
apparently,
I
apparently you've come to the same conclusion as me, which is that headsets, no matter how high quality, CD microphones.
but an argument could be made that I don't necessarily need this to do whatever I'm doing. And so do I really need to be spending the extra money on these headphones when I could be giving it to charity or something like that, right? It's
You
hard.
are
I mean, it's not
you are
easy.
improving the economy though, because people have jobs to do those headsets.
Yeah. This is what I was saying. I think the reason why I'm against luxury specifically is that you're allocating human resources to go make handbags or something like that that have the Louis Vuitton print on it or whatever, right? And it's like, should we really be spending all this extra time and effort of humans going and doing that when they could be trying to get to Mars or curing cancer or whatever, right? So if I'm gonna use my capital, it should be for to do risky things with it, like things that I think Bezos talks about this in some of the writings I've heard about Amazon, where he's like, we have a societal obligation to take huge risks because that's the whole point of like having a technology business, is to take the capital that you made from the prior business and throw it into like extremely risky things that nobody else would put their money behind. So I kind
Yeah,
of agree with that sentiment, I guess.
I agree too, because I mean, that's how you even achieve growth, even if you're only thinking from a selfish perspective. The reality is that the technology companies that have slowed down and are not investing in new technologies are now kind of a thing of the past. IBM, for example, used to be like state of the art technology. Now it's not. But let's talk about you funding junior auditors. How did that start? How
Yeah,
did that?
I sent a tweet thread out about this because I was like, I think Zach is another well-regarded auditor. He was, after I said like, okay, I'm closing this up, like people stop DMing me, please, which didn't work. People are still DMing me, but um, he was like, hey, I want to know who the people you picked were so I can follow their progress or whatever. And so I was like, okay, I'll throw up a thread about like, how did I come up with the idea? How was I picking people? That sort of thing. One thing I won't do is talk about the specifics of the deal, though, because I don't want them to feel bad, or it also kind of puts me in a negative negotiating uh, position
Understood.
when if I try to do it in the future. But so, what happened was like, so we do Y Academy, right? I'm part of Y Academy. I'm a resident there. We had the last block, and one of the fellows from the last block basically was like, "Hey, can I kind of like apprentice under you in some sense, right?" And normally I say no to those sorts of things, as I just don't have the time to like mentor people. As another thing, a lot of people were asking me about the junior auditor thing was like, can you mentor me? And I was like, this is purely a financial deal where like I said, I'm using my capital to allow somebody to take this risk that they otherwise wouldn't be able to take. But in this case, I was like, yeah, okay, I can sort of like help you along your way or whatever. So he's been sort of just like following me along in audits. And if there's something that I'm like, I just don't have time to go like do the due diligence on this like dependency protocol or whatever, I'll send him off. He'll go do the due diligence and he'll bring like a write up or something like that, right? So he's in the process of like growing his own career and all that stuff. And so we got on a call where we were talking about like he was interviewing for a job at one of the auditing firms and wanted to like pick my brain about like what the interview process was going to be like, or like should he take the job, how's he going to negotiate the salary, all that stuff. And at the end of the call, he was like, man, I wish I could just do C4. Because I keep telling him, like, just go do C4. You'll kind of get better by doing C4. And then finding other jobs will be easier once you climb up the leaderboard in C4. Because you're sort of proving, it's like it's the same reason why the boot camps are useful. You're proving that you can do the work without having to go through an interview process or whatever. And so I was like, yeah, I thought about like funding a junior researcher to just like let them go do that and not have to worry about finding a job. Cause he was saying if I could just do C4 all day, I would be better off, but I need to go get a job because I need money now. And so I was like thinking about it. And then like we got off the call and like maybe a couple of hours later, it was still in my head. So I was like, I'll tweet about this. Like that's kind of how I use Twitter, is like whatever I'm doing at any particular moment. If I have an interesting observation about the thing I'm doing, I'll tweet it. It doesn't matter if I was like, so lately I've been tweeting a lot about ZK, and so everybody thinks I'm like a ZK person or whatever, but I'm like, that's just what I'm studying right now, right? If I was doing kite surfing, I would be tweeting about kite surfing and my observations on kite surfing. So anyway, I thought about this and I was like, I'll just fire off a tweet and whatever. And then a bunch of people were like, even from that tweet started DMing me like, can I be that junior auditor? So it wasn't that I was like in my first tweet, I wasn't, people misunderstood me. They thought that I was saying, who wants to do this? It was more that I was thinking about this person in in particular. And then I got all this inbound, and I was like, wait a second, maybe I should open this up to everybody, not just this one person. Let's see if. So then I said, okay, like DM me, like let's see. And I got like just tons of people. I had somebody was a fry cook, another person worked at a call center. I was like, this is crazy. So they don't know any technology at all, right? But they're still like, I want to become a smart contract auditor, which was really, it was kind of inspiring to me. I didn't realize how many people were. Yeah, go ahead.
One, not how much are you giving them, but for how long are you sponsoring them? If you could say it, if you can't say it, we can move on. And the second one is, how do you interview them?
Yeah, so I had 4 questions that I kind of like just immediately sent people as soon as they DM'd me, regardless of what. There's a lot of interesting pitches, by the way. So people had different ways of like they're sending me their first DM. It was almost like I was a chick on Tinder or something like that. Everybody had their own. So yeah, I said, where are you at in your auditing journey, right? That was my first question. And like a lot of people were like, I don't even know how to program. And so it was easy for me to be like, hey, sorry, like you need to go learn how to code first before you can even start learning how to break protocols. So come back to me in a year or something like that. Which consequently is another thing I'm hoping this does, is like inspires people to like come into the space. That was the first question I asked. And then the next couple of questions I think were along those same lines, where it was like, how much do you need in living expenses to like keep yourself afloat so you can switch to this full time? How long do you think you're going to need the funding for? And then what percentage of your earnings are you going to be willing to pay me over that time period while you're receiving the funding? And I think for every deal, it ranged between, I think, 3 months to 6 months, where people were saying, and it was sort of an estimate. I'm still pretty flexible about all this stuff, right? Like if somebody gets past their 3 months and they're like, hey, I'm still not quite here, but I've made this progress, and I'm going to be willing to be like, yeah, okay, let's keep this rolling for a little while longer. I mean, for me, that's the success criteria. Is not, I'm not trying to get rich from this. It's really just like, how many people can I get to be able to do this full time, right?
Kind of a non-profit thing where you're trying
to, in a sense,
do it again.
In fact, I could see myself turning this into like a formalized nonprofit if it works, right? The thing is, like, I don't know. I've never done this before. So there was a couple of deals where I was like, this is like on the fence where I might be willing to do this. But because I'd never done it before, I was like, I have to go with like the least risky options that I can possibly get and go with those folks only and kind of draw the line there. And then if they do well and this ends up working out and it becomes a success, I'm definitely going to take the money that they pay back into it, and I might expand it and go into higher cost of living locales. Or
like, I'm sure there would be a lot of companies that have grant programs that would be willing to put in 10, 20, 30, $50,000 checks into this.
It's a good idea. Yeah. You want to partner with me on that?
Why not? I have
Let's chat. Let's chat about it. Yeah, let's chat about it offline.
I think we can start attracting people to it, and we can definitely start to try and raise funds for it. It will be fun.
Yeah, I think, but if we can get these first couple of people right and like prove out the case study, I think that's what's important here, is that we have successful cases that we can point to and say. That's why I kind of did more than one, because I was like, okay, well, let's say I'm bad at picking people and this one person sucks, then I'll think, okay, this doesn't work.
Even if you are good at picking people, there's still going to be some people that give up.
Yeah. I mean, it's plus auditing is itself somewhat of a risk-based endeavor, right? Where you look in the code for vulnerabilities, whether you go to Immunify or C4 or traditional auditing, right? There's a lot of like mental calculus in terms of risk adjustment that you have to do in here. And that was actually one of the things I was talking to the Y Academy resident about this morning, was that risk is always there. And so let's say I pick somebody and they go off and do Immunify for 6 months and they don't find anything. But then on the 7th month, if I had just kept funding them, then maybe they would have landed a $10 million bounty, right? We'll never know.
It is feast or famine. And I know this because I'm on the other side of the spectrum, where I'm not on the spectrum. I did most of the management for our bug bounty program at Tucon. And so it's like, I see the fact that okay, you just reported this bug, but literally yesterday it got reported by somebody else. So all I can do is give you a symbolic bounty. I can't really
Yeah,
pay you a bounty. It's not
right.
that I don't want to, but it's. So that's kind of the thing with Immunify. Whereas with Code Arena, it's okay. You found about the same bug, and you found the same bug. You both get half, and that's I think more fair. Definitely less fees to
This is
pay.
interesting. This is interesting. I want to ask you some more questions. I know this is you're interviewing me, but
Go.
so yeah, I didn't realize you were running the bug bounty program for
I'm
your
not
for 2K.
running it. Like
And I
I
was
don't have
actually
full power over it. I'm just kind of, I guess,
involved in it.
very involved in it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, like, do you have it up on like Immunify, or like are you guys running it
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah,
It's
we're
on
on
Immunify.
Immunify. I pushed very
Interesting.
hard for us to be on Immunify because I figured if we self-host this thing, nobody's gonna trust it because everybody gets burnt by self-hosted bug bounty programs. If it's on
Right.
Immunify, everybody will trust it. One and two, it also what like my team is amazing. We have amazing people at Tucon. They're really like ethical, good people. But I still like to, even with myself, I like to put myself in structures where I am enforced or incentivized to do the right thing. Even though I expect myself to do the right thing, I want to put myself into good structures. You know what I
Make
mean?
sure. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
I guess I want to pick your brain more about what it's like to be on the other, because I've never talked to somebody who is running the bug bounty program. I'm usually the one submitting the bugs. So like you already mentioned one case that's kind of interesting, whereas like somebody beats you to the bug by a couple
but
of days. How often does that happen?
it does happen. I think we had so we have had the bug bounty program for a few months now. I off the top of my head know at least of two people that have reported a bug that has been reported before.
Ah, that sucks, man.
And we have
Do you
like
feel bad for the auditor?
yeah, I do. I do.
So what's the highest payout you guys have done so far?
Right now we have only done, I think, like I can't say a real number, but like a few $1,000 under 10 over one.
That's good then. I mean, that means that your guys' bugs are probably in the lower severity
Yeah,
level, right?
we have a lot of like self-created DevOps stuff and just a lot of stuff that really put us in a good structure where it's hard to ship shit, so to speak.
Good. Glad to hear it. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
And we also have
Um,
like auditors. This is actually, I was going to give a talk in Romania about cybersecurity. And one of the things that people don't understand, I think Pashov, do you know Pashov? Pashov
mhm,
Kram? He tweeted about if a protocol gets hacked that was audited by a just one auditor, is it the fault of
right.
the audit that the protocol got hacked? And the way I'm thinking of it, no, it's not the fault of the auditor at all. It's definitely the fault of whoever is managing their security kind of system. Because this is not a thing that is like bugs are not supposed to get caught just in one thing. It's kind of like a funnel where okay, we're trying to catch it in the PR review, but if it doesn't get caught in the PR review, hopefully it gets caught by the CI. Maybe it gets caught by the auditor. Maybe it gets caught by the second auditor. If not, maybe hopefully it gets caught by a gray hat that we managed to convince on Immunify to be a
Yes.
white.
Yes.
Like if you got to be hacked, it means you didn't have the proper kind of security funnel in place to catch as many of these things as you can before they happen.
And I think that last backstop is, in my opinion, the most important one, right? You have to give that incentive to a gray hat to
Yeah,
decide to go white hat. Otherwise, they
yeah,
are going to. And this is my one of my concerns is like why I keep hammering on about this on my Twitter account is like every time I hear about somebody who's getting stiffed by a protocol on Immunify, I'm like I'm going to amplify the shit out of that on my Twitter account because if it keeps happening and it becomes the norm, then people are going to go, what? Why am I even
Immun-
submitting this bug? I'm just going to go hack the protocol myself.
the Immunify team though does a good job of like keeping people, keeping protocols to do a good job.
Yeah,
And
this is why I wanted to talk to you because you're on the other side of it. So I do want to hear all of this stuff. It's very interesting.
it's a very good setup because Immunify is incentivized to award as much money as possible, because the way they get paid is they get 10%. If I
Right.
give you as an auditor $5,000, Immunify gets $500 on top of what I pay you. And so the more we pay out, the more Immunify gets. So Immunify is definitely incentivized to get us to pay more.
So this is one thing I wanted to ask you about then. So all these cases that I'm retweeting, I don't know the technical details. I don't have time to go look into them. How often are you getting bullshit submitted to you that you're like, this is not a bug? It's got to happen
Yeah,
like all the time, right?
yeah, we have that too. We have that too.
Yeah, that's got to be like a pain in the ass for you guys to have to
It
sift
is.
through all the bullshit people are submitting to you.
It is. It is. That's why I'm kind of. That's why I said I'm kind of managing the program, because I am on my team the most junior guy. So then it's easy to have me be the first responder, so others, more senior engineers, don't spend time on the BS or the very poorly structured reports. Because some people are not native English speakers or good
Right.
English speakers at all, or they're not even just generally organized as people, and they make a report that may be completely haphazard, and it's very hard to go through it. And then once you eventually figure out what they're saying, you realize that literally the bug may be just like, oh, the admin might go crazy. And guess I didn't think about the admin going crazy and stealing the money. I mean, I'm the admin, so
That's to me the hardest part of being an auditor, is to know when to report and when to not report, right? There's a
I
lot of
would.
stuff that's like totally subjective where you think that they shouldn't be doing it that way. So my rule of thumb is like, unless it results in like loss of funds or a behavior that the developer perhaps didn't intend, I don't report on it. Even though I think there's a lot of times where I look at the code and I'm like, this is the stupidest way you could have possibly implemented this. And it's like a 10x better way of doing it. I just keep my mouth shut because it's not my place.
Yeah, you have to kind of make the difference between what's a security report and what's a refactoring suggestion.
Right. Right.
You have
Which
to
I'm
make
sure
that.
you guys get a lot of those on the Immunify program,
Mm,
unfortunately, right?
yeah, we do. We do get some of that too. I mean, it's yeah, but you have to sift to filter to them, and it's, I think, part of the just the game. You have to live with it. It's hard for us, especially. It's been super hard over the holidays because there were people that were off, and we are also trying to ship projects, and it's super hard to
Right.
manage. But I'd rather us have the hardship of having to manage this thing on top of shipping, on top of refactoring, on top of all the work that we do, than not know of bugs.
Right.
Because
Totally.
there was this report from a US auditing firm. It was a really good report, really well written, really well organized, and it was of a bug that we actually knew about because of our auditing firm, and it was actually based on some code that right now is inactive, but we will re-enable in the future that piece of the protocol. But which is why also that we didn't fix the bug even though we knew about it. But really, like, which is why I also mentioned earlier that you should have more than one auditor. If you only had one auditor and they didn't notice that bug, you would be very happy to have the white hat on Immunify tell you, look at this thing.
Totally.
So yeah, definitely a funnel in security.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I um I remember the first time I missed a critical in an audit, and it really opened my eyes, because up until that point I thought I was a genius. I was catching everything. I was like the best auditor ever, whatever, right? And all it takes for you to do is to miss one critical to realize like how easy it is to just like flat out miss a bug. And it terrifies you as an audit. All the other audits I've done since then, it's heightened my sense of like stress as I'm looking at the code in a way that it never did before.
Oh, I totally get it, because it's like I get definitely get your stress on your side of things, because you're putting your stamp of approval over the code and you're saying this is good. And then if it gets hacked, I can definitely see the guilt that you would have.
Totally.
But what I am this is a hill I'm willing to die on. If the protocol then says it's your fault as the auditor, I think they're dickheads. Point blank.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think I remember telling some of my coworkers at Amazon that they were like, "So what happens if the protocol gets hacked after you audit it?" And I was like, "Nothing." And they were like, "What?" Like they in their head they think you should be liable for
Sued.
the financial damages, yeah, or sued or whatever. But it's like there's so few of us doing this work, and to get someone to basically go out on a limb and look at the code and stamp it, and it's all in good faith. Everybody knows it's all in good faith, because the alternative is I go black hat and you don't even know that I'm sifting through your code and looking for a way of breaking it or whatever, right?
Yeah, especially since all the code is out in the open.
Yeah,
And
sometimes I'm like, what are we doing? I think like, why are we doing this? The problem is it's on chain, yeah. So it's like even if you don't open source it, somebody can still analyze it and
yep,
find the bug.
yep, it's still there. It's like
Yeah.
this is the thing. We are kind of we're not open source, but our code is definitely public. Not only obviously on the blockchain, but also in a GitHub repo. And it's like some people say, "Oh, but we have had people attack our company for like you're not open source, you're doing bad stuff. Like this is not okay. This is not crypto." Look, the code is there. It's public. You could literally you see it if you wanted to see it, right?
So when you say it's public but you're not open source, you mean you're going to publish the code when you guys are authoring it, but you're not going to let other contributors come in and write the code and the protocol. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's the current setup we have where we are not open source licensing it. We are working towards it, but well, I've seen this
Oh,
with
I
one.
see. I see. I see. What you're saying is like somebody can't come in and fork it basically and like go
Yeah,
launch it on the chain.
yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
see. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
So it's like kind of like Uniswap, right? Everybody's like up in arms that Uniswap did that after Sushi Swap Vampire attacked them. Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
tough. I mean, I'm not in that business, right? So because I'm an auditor, so my job is just like go find bugs. So yeah,
you
I don't
are
know how
still
I
a
would say
like
that again.
you do work at Robinhood, right? What's your title there?
Yeah, good question. So I'm actually not doing any sort of smart contract work at Robinhood, at least not right now.
I would have
So yeah, I'm
guessed.
primarily a backend engineer there. I guess sort of a full stack. Sometimes I have to go write the iOS code as well, but usually I'm doing backend.
Why Robinhood?
That's a good question. Um, so my plan after I left Amazon was I was going to be a smart contract auditor. I had an offer from Consensus Diligence, and I was like, I think I'd even signed it. I just hadn't sent it back to them. And I got a DM from a recruiter at Robinhood, and it was for a staff engineering position. And so I was like, well, I'll at least entertain the idea. I'll do the interviews and just see what happens. But I was like, this is a traditional backend engineering role. And I'm like, I did that at Amazon. I don't want to do that anymore. But I went through the interview. I was actually going to join the traditional crypto, like in the actual Robinhood app, trading Bitcoin and Ethereum or whatever. I was going to join that team. But during my interview process, I interviewed with my current manager, and I was asking her like what she was working on at the company. And she was telling me about this non-custodial wallet that they're working on that I hadn't heard anything about it until that day. And so the recruiter came back to me and was like, yeah, they want to move forward. Like, here's the offer, whatever. And I was like, I don't want to join that team. The way I'll join Robinhood is if I get to work on this particular project. And she was like, okay, I'll go back and like see, what we can move around and see if we can make that work. And then they came back and were like, yeah, you can go work on that. So for me, it was less to do with Robinhood specifically and more to do with the product that I'm working on right now, which I don't know if I can say this, but it'll
Don't.
be public in 3 days. We're starting to roll the wallet out publicly. So up until now, it's been in like private beta, but we're starting to like let people onto the actual app in public. So I'm pretty excited to see, have joined the company kind of at the beginning of the product and then see it all the way to the end is going to be pretty exciting for me, I think.
It is going to be interesting. I mean, I don't think anybody that I know of knew about Robinhood launching an non-custodial wallet.
Yeah, they've done a few like PR launches and stuff like this, so it is public. I'm not like saying any non-public
Because I was a
information.
bit scared we're going to have to delete this.
No. Yeah, it's out there. I think you can even sign up for the wait list. But again, we're going public with it, so
Yeah.
it's probably like kind of pointless to join the wait list at this point.
So basically, you're gonna kill MetaMask. You
um,
have interviewed for consensus, and now you're betraying them. That's what I'm hearing right
yeah,
here.
I mean, I was when I was gonna join consensus, it was gonna be the auditing arm, right? So I wasn't gonna be working on any sort of product or anything like that. But I mean, there are a few non-custodial wallets out there right now. So there's MetaMask, there's the Rainbow wallet, there's the Trust wallet, and then Coinbase has their own non-custodial wallet as well. So it's not like we're specifically going after MetaMask, but I do think that
They
I
have the
think
biggest
that
numbers,
oh,
just for being.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I do think that there is a lot lacking in custodial wallets, non-custodial wallets right now, though, and so I think that's sort of why Robinhood, right? This decision to go into the non-custodial wallet market was made well before I joined the company, right? So I don't have any say in it, but I did think it was a brilliant idea from a business
Yeah.
strategy perspective, and
It's,
that's part of the reason why I joined the company.
my question of why Robinhood was precisely because Robinhood is not web free at all. It's very web two, very centralized, very it's like Robinhood engineer and smart contract auditor, and they don't touch each other. And so I was very interesting to me, but I now see the point. I do see the point. Have you guys looked at MetaMask snaps?
Yeah, again, so a lot of these product decisions are made by product folks
Oh,
specifically, right? And so that's their job to like go look into all that stuff and sort of figure out. The problem is that you, as a business, as a company or whatever, right, you have a finite amount of resources, and so you have to sort of prioritize, where do we go with this? But yeah, I mean, pretty much every feature in the other wallets we're very familiar with. Let's put it that way.
that's good. Good for you guys. I let's not go too deep into it to not divulge any. Um, well, I guess another question that I want to ask you is how do you even balance out the work
Yeah, it's hard.
between the two? Because I personally am kind of, I guess, kind of a workaholic. Like when I used to work 50 hours a week at my company, and when they moved me back to 40 hours, I got so pissed because now I have an extra 10 hours. What the fuck am I gonna do with this extra board? So I always find stuff to work on, or I do something on the side. So, but at this point, I think auditing definitely takes more than 10 hours a week.
Yes,
With
definitely
all your
more than 10
balance.
hours a week. I just don't sleep and I don't eat. No, I'm just kidding. It's hard. In fact, I was sort of telling that other Y Academy resident this morning. He was like asking me how the new year was treating me, and I was like, bro, I'm like too busy. I got too much stuff going on. I need to start like telling people no. I think it's super hard. I mean, yeah, I don't do any. Like I wake up and I like boot up my laptop and I start doing something, whether it's Robinhood or studying some new, like right now, I think I mentioned, right, the current thing I'm really interested in is ZK. So I've been like hammering through as much ZK content as I possibly can to learn as much as I can about this space, or it's auditing or whatever, right? So it's like I don't stop ever, basically, from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. So I don't do things like, a lot of people will like watch movies before bed, or one thing I was doing a lot at Amazon is I was reading an insane amount. And so like, nights and weekends, I was sort of reading a lot. I had to cut all that stuff out of my schedule and just, this is basically all I do, whether it's Robinhood or auditing.
What's the book you really loved last year?
A book I really loved last year.
Yeah.
So the book that kind of like went through the Twitterverse that was really hot last year was called The Sovereign Individual. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but
I
it's
have
kind of
heard of
about,
it, but
yeah,
please.
it's kind of about what's interesting is they wrote the book in the 90s and they made all these like predictions about how technology will change the calculus of violence and monopoly on violence, right? So up till now, the governments have all had kind of a monopoly on violence, and the claim is that this arose out of the fact that property was built around the industrial age, where you had factories, right? So property, capital, and labor were all centralized in the factory, and so you needed the government to step in and take this monopoly of violence, so that somebody couldn't just show up to the factory, kill everybody, and take the factory. They did a study of like feudal empires back in the day, and this is why you had castles for the same reason, right? You had to have a lord that would protect you from the other lords, otherwise they just come and kill everybody, take all the stuff, right? And so their argument is that like as commerce moves more and more into the digital age, it becomes more and more challenging for somebody to come in and take your wealth or whatever you're building on the internet by pure force. And for that reason, it changes the mental calculus, and maybe you don't need a government around as much as you would
I
originally
would think
think.
with that. So
Yeah,
I think you're
go ahead.
thinking or they are thinking in terms of like if you have a wallet, crypto wallet, nobody can take that or something like that, right? And
You know what's
because only
very interesting? What's very interesting about the book is this was all pre-crypto, right? So this was 90s, early 90s when they wrote the book.
that's
So one
one
of
of
the
the
things they talk about is like the dot or whatever, what was it, the
.com bubble.
no. Remember the thing where they thought the dates would all change and like it would
Oh
break the
yeah,
internet?
what was it? Oh wow. I have to Google this.
What the heck was the term for that? But anyway, you know what I'm saying. They write about that like it's a serious threat in the book because it's like impending doom. So it's like a little bit funny in that regard, where they like totally missed the mark about some of their predictions, but they did predict
Y2K.
cryptocurrency. Yeah, Y2K. Thank you. They did nail it with cryptocurrency though. They talk about there's going to be this digital native money, and like you don't need taxes anymore because you can take a small fraction of the transactions. So like they nailed it on all those accounts, but they missed it on like some of the other stuff. But yeah, you were saying crypto
Did
wallets, people can't.
I saw a tweet about how essentially a bank and money in a bank is essentially a multi-sig between you, the bank, and the government. And I don't know who made it. Did you tweet that?
No, I didn't, but that's a great tweet.
I
I
don't
wish I
know
would
who.
have tweeted that.
I wish too. It was a great tweet and it was so true, and I totally agree with it. But ultimately, the reason I said I earlier I disagree with the main premise of the book that violence is not going to be monopolized. Even if I have my money in a multi-sig of my own or in a wallet of my own, and only I have access to it, there's no government that can take it like that. Somebody can still come in my house and say, "Hey, give us the password to the wallet." And if they apply enough violence, at some point, I'll just
You're
give
gonna
them.
give it.
At
Yeah.
some, I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, no,
But
I actually agree with you. I tend to think that, at least I don't think that the shift is going to be as dramatic as they were proposing. Um, right before I finished, or right after I finished the book, the Ukraine war started, and so you're like, that. Tell me how that's not a monopoly on violence. Like violence is definitely still a part of our everyday life. But what the book did do is it made me shift and think more around the importance of violence. Up till now, I've always been like, oh, everybody's lives in peace and we all are just trying to build things together and blah 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 blah. But then you really think about a lot of the fundamental ways that we've structured our societies are around keeping people from being violent, either to one another or from outside in.
have you done any fighting sports?
No, I watched a lot of the UFC during the pandemic, and I was like, man, I really, because yeah, I mean, there's something so true, I think,
Primal.
about the act of two people performing violence on one another. So I guess, do you do that then? Are you like in
I
any
don't
sort
do
of,
it anymore, but I used to compete in boxing and then later in judo.
wow, cool. What was your experience like that? I talked to a boxer a couple years ago. I was asking him about it, and I was like, what is that like, KOing somebody or getting KO'd or whatever, right?
I never got KO'd and never KO'd anybody, but I can tell you the first 6 months of training are the worst. But
Really?
at some point, you get used to the violence and you start enjoying, surprisingly, you start enjoying even getting hit. You start enjoying just the act of fighting because it becomes like a chess.
Right.
Comes like
That's why I
20.
like watching it so much, because once you understand the aspects of it, and like each person has their own sort of strategy in the way that they're enacting the violence, right? And but they can't just go in there and clobber the other guy, right? Because there's all this risk that goes into. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Everybody
like
thinks,
if you tell other people that don't watch that stuff that you're interested in and why you try and say, okay, oh, it's deeper than they're just punching each other or whatever, right? Then they'll roll their eyes at you and be like, yeah, you just like watching people punch each other and you're trying to make up an excuse.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was actually telling, I remember even telling my girlfriend this. I came home with like a black eye. And I remember telling my girlfriend and my mother, they were saying, you should just quit. Why are you doing this? Like, you're not going to be a national champion and you're getting a black eye and you're much smarter than this. You should do something. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I love it. I live for this. This is amazing. And this, the black eye or the broken lip, I feel a sense of respect for myself, being the only guy in my classroom or being the only guy at the workplace or whatever. I'm the only guy that's fighting. All these
Right.
guys right here, maybe I have the black eye, but if all of any of these guys would try something with me,
I
I can
could
take.
be, yeah, I could take them. I think there's also something. So I played a lot of team sports, but I never played like a solo. I think that's another thing that's interesting about it is that's like when you lose, you can't blame it on your teammate and go, that guy didn't pass me the ball enough or whatever, right? It's like you lost. It's one against one, right? There's not many
Yep.
sports like that
That's
out
what I
there.
was about to touch on. I don't do it anymore for reasons, for pragmatic reasons, but it really changed my life because it taught me discipline and it taught me that I am entirely responsible for whether I win the fight or the tournament of life, so to say. So I
Yeah,
think it's
Mike Novogratz talks about that. If you listen to interviews about him, he was like a state champion wrestler or something like that. And so when the interviewer inevitably asks him for advice he'd give to a young person or whatever, and he always says, "Do wrestling," and that's for that reason. I don't think he specifically thinks wrestling is the only sport for that, but you should
yeah,
pick a sport where it's all on you and it's all or nothing. And yeah, I
yeah.
do kind of regret. That's one of my big regrets is I never
You
did
should
like an
do it.
all one
Mark
on one.
Zuckerberg started training in MMA literally last year.
Yeah, he's doing
And
judo, right?
I don't know what he's doing, but
I think he's
he's
doing
doing something.
judo.
And something is better than nothing.
I should do that. Maybe
You
you've
should.
convinced me. I'll think about it. The problem is
Well,
I got to squeeze it in my auditing. I got to drop auditing to go get punched in the face.
you don't
That's
even
a
have to
hard
do it.
sell.
You don't even have to do it a lot. Just twice a week. It's good enough. Twice a week for a full year, and then you can quit.
My problem is that I get obsessed with stuff when I start doing it, and I feel like I have to be the best. And so then I go, okay, I'm gonna drop everything, and I'm only gonna do boxing for like 40 hours a week or whatever, right? So I'm like,
Take a
I
sabbatical.
need to get better at doing things for the sake of
Calmly.
enjoyment. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm the same. I get obsessed. I and I have to pour everything in. This is why I'm not really working out anymore, and I've gotten severely out of shape. I used
Me too.
You can't see it right now, but I'm like 100 and something kilograms. And when I was boxing, I was like 70, 75. And it's an insane change. Like
Yeah.
compared to what I was able to do and what I'm able to do now, I'm disappointed in myself still.
I was gonna say that when you're asked like how do I fit all this stuff in my schedule, that's part of it. Is like I've basically stopped exercising completely because an extra hour I can cram at the end of the day to study some new concept or look at some code or whatever, right? It's bad. Because I
So,
think part of the problem is like the good thing about exercise is it helps like clear your brain chemicals or
yeah,
whatever, right? And so you can actually think better and perform better at the cognitive task that you're trying to do. But it's just hard to like give that up, step away from the computer, and come back refreshed. I need to.
it's
You're right. I probably should get into boxing or something.
or at least set up a home gym.
Yeah. So I was for a while. I was like, I was exercising in my basement basically because it's an unfinished basement in the house I'm living in right now. But it just eventually it starts to drop by the wayside when you're like, I have to prioritize all these other things I got going
Yeah.
on. I also have a daughter, right? And so it's like time I'm not spending with her, I'd be like, hey, go play on your own. I'm going to go jump around in the basement for 30 minutes.
The way I think about pretty much everything in my life is that something beats nothing. If you can just work out for
Yeah,
even
agreed.
minutes, even 5 minutes, even one set of push-ups,
It's
anything.
10 times better than nothing. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So that's how I still work out to a degree, just much less than what I used to do.
That's good. You're better than me, unfortunately.
No, it's the obsessiveness part. You have to learn to stop beating yourself up, and you have to
I
learn
know.
to stop being so aggressive towards your goals. You have to learn to accept good enough.
I think that's part of the problem too with like exercise, right? Because you're like, well, 30 minutes is nothing. Why should I do 30 minutes? I need to be there for an hour, right? And so then, yeah,
Yeah.
you take it to the extreme on all the times. You're totally right.
That's really why you're not doing it. That's why most people are not doing. They set too high goals.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Let's talk about ZK proof and stuff like that because I don't know much about it, but people
Nobody
like you,
does. So that's good.
I mean, it's called zero knowledge, so it makes sense that nobody knows anything, right? But people want to know about it, and also I wanted to ask about it too. So, if you could give us like an intro, like a dumbed down, aimed at a very junior engineer intro into what ZK proof is,
Sure.
and into what's kind of like the requirements of even starting to learn about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because you're like, I could say like go learn Circom, which is like it's like the Java, I guess you could call it, of ZK proving systems. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out that's like better than Circom, but that's kind of like the old granddaddy that started it all, and so people can go. The problem with that is like it's like a little bit like Solidity, where it's like the language itself is so simple that you'll trick yourself into thinking that you understand it all, and you'll end up writing some insecure code, basically, right? The problem with ZKPs is you have to have all this background knowledge around how the protocols are working and how they're functioning in order for you to write correct Circom that's not going to get easily hacked. And part of the problem with ZK is if there is a hack, if you do have an under constrained circuit that you've built through Circom, no one's going to know that it's been hacked, right? And so you do need to know all this extra theory that I'll sort of talk about right now. So that's I guess part of the reason why there's so few people doing it is because you can't just dive in and start slinging code, because the way that your mind works in terms of imperative programming will not translate to Circom or any sort of ZK proving system. So if we want to just say, okay, well, on a high level, like what is this technology? What's actually going on here? Under the hood, when you authors like some Circom circuits, basically, they get split up into a bunch of different pieces, and these pieces are sort of performing the zero knowledge protocol, the ZK Stark protocol under the hood. So when you're writing the code, you're thinking, oh, it'll just compile into bytecode and it will run on some computer somewhere, because that's traditionally how we've been doing things. But that isn't how Circom's actually functioning. And so how does that ZK Snark protocol actually work under the hood is extremely complex, and that's why most people are sort of staying out of it. It involves a lot of polynomial math, and it involves a lot of sort of like a little bit probability theory, where the sort of, if you want to go dive into more details on this, you can go look up the sum check protocol. It's a way of sort of proving that two polynomials are the same polynomial without evaluating them at every single point in the plane. And that's sort of the underlying kind of mechanic that's going on under the hood for ZK technology. There's a bunch of other, I think I tweeted about this like a month or so ago when I was like really getting into, sum check protocol. There's a bunch of other stuff that sits atop the sum check protocol where you're like, there's fiat Shamir transformation. Like there's all this cryptography background that you need to know around making the sum check protocol more efficient, which is effectively what we're constantly trying to do in the ZK Snark, in these ZK Snark proving systems. Because if you just naively run the sum check protocol, you're going to have a bunch of network calls between the prover and the verifier over and over again. And so there's a bunch of stuff you could do in the middle in terms of cryptography to make these things like run really quickly. And that's where all the additional complexity comes in. So if I'm going to leave it at, explain it like I'm 5, junior engineer explanation, I would say go, look up the sum check protocol, and that should tell you kind of generally what's going on under the hood here.
If somebody, I would say, like, from what I'm hearing from you now, from what I've been hearing around, this is not something that should be tackled by a junior engineer or a junior. This is something
Yeah,
that requires
definitely not.
deeper knowledge, not just about programming, but just about like computer science, mathematics, stuff like that.
Yes, that's all true. What I would say though is like you can still it's very much like Solidity, okay? Not insofar as like you're going to be able to learn it and like start writing protocols with it or whatever, but the devil's in the details with Solidity, right? So when you're authoring Solidity, if you don't know, for example, like let's just take an example, right? If you don't know that front running exists, you might write a very insecure protocol, right? So you have to keep all this background knowledge around how does the Ethereum protocol come to consensus? How does the mempool work? What other protocols are out there that this protocol is interacting with for like Oracle manipulation sort of attacks, this sort of stuff, right? Is all going on in the back of your head when you're looking at code and trying to break it or at least make it secure, right? What I'm saying is you need that same level of background knowledge in terms of ZK protocols and how those work in order to author circuits that aren't going to be buggy and easily breakable. And part of the problem is like it's even further than that, because when you're writing Solidity, at least it's imperative code, right? And so you can at least take everything you've learned about C++ or Java or Python or whatever language you've learned before, and it can apply it to Solidity. The problem is that most ZK proving systems are not imperative because they get broken down into this protocol thing that's happening under the hood. And so it's even harder thing for you to like, shift your mind around. And for all these reasons, you have to have all this background knowledge in order to author valid zero knowledge protocol proofs.
Yeah, it sounds like not something I would tackle this year, definitely.
I mean, so for me, I was the same way. I was like, I knew this stuff was like super complex. And what happened was the founder of Y Academy reached out to me. He was like, hey, we're trying to do an offshoot of this for zero knowledge stuff. And you've expressed some level of interest in this. Are you interested in, contributing to this in some fashion? And I kind of was like, same thing we're talking about, right? I have to choose my time wisely. And so I'm like, this is like this massive endeavor. I'm gonna have to go learn all this math and how all this stuff works. And I'm gonna have to drop audits to do this, right? Or at least start saying no to some. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. And he was like, dude, from what I've talked to other ZK projects, there's like an infinite amount of work and an infinite amount of money behind all these systems. So if you're willing to go learn them, sky's the limits, basically, right? And so I was like, okay. But really, for me, what it was is he was giving me like a stamp in the ground of a date where we're going to try and do a boot camp. And that was really all I needed for inspiration. And then he added the cream on top where it's like, yeah, there's also all this money sloshing around here, which is similar to smart contract auditing. And so I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot. So I started tweeting about it. And then as I was learning it, right, like I said before, I shit post whatever comes to my mind. In this case, I was studying ZK. So I just started throwing some ZK tweets out there. And yeah, they started blowing up big time. I started getting some inbounds from some VC firms that were like, hey, are you auditing ZK stuff? Are you interested? And I was like, no, I'm still a noob. I don't know anything about this really. But that opened my eyes to like, okay, he wasn't joking. Like there's hardly anybody knows how to do this stuff. I had another tweet or another DM from somebody else who's working in the space. They're an anon, but they're working in the space. And they're like, there's only like 300 people maybe on the planet who know anything about these systems. And so he was like sort of calling me out about like have some one of my tweets or whatever. So he's like, I know whoever you're talking about, I know them personally because there's only one of 300 of us or whatever, right? And so this is sort of kind of, I was like, oh, okay, like really there's hardly anybody who even understands these systems at this point in time. And so that sort of helped me inspire me to like keep going down that rabbit hole. But I think generally I'm just fascinated by it. Like regardless, I think I would still be, because I've always been interested in cryptography and all this other stuff, right? So there's a lot of cryptography involved here. That's like not necessarily auditing related. Auditing, I mean, I like doing it, but it's not like the only thing I care about, right? I've always been interested in all this other stuff as well. In fact, the cryptography protocol that we're running on the non-custodial wallet at Robinhood, I didn't design it or author it, but I implemented most of the stuff there because they'd already designed it kind of by the time I joined the company, but they sort of slotted me right in and I started implementing all that stuff. So it's just like I'm obsessed with it, right? And so like even if there weren't all these opportunities available, I would still be doing it anyway. Because a lot of people have asked me, like a lot of other auditors are like, why are you wasting your time with this, right? It's not paying me immediately, right, compared to auditing. So why would I go and spend a year in a cave somewhere stroking my beard, learning mathematics or whatever, right? It's because I like doing it.
I mean, this is actually a question that I used to ask a lot in my interviews. It's, do you love what you're doing? And I think you just answered it. But I think it's super important to just at least enjoy what you're doing, if not fully love it. It just gives you more energy to achieve more. And which is not to say that you have to pick when you're young precisely the thing that you love. Because I don't know about you, but when I started coding, I hated it. I did it exclusively for the money, exclusively for the career opportunities. I did not like it one bit, but now I love it. I wouldn't. I actually had a friend ask me recently this year, uh, if you would say, for example, sell a company, and you would take like a huge sum of money, would you stop coding? What would you do with your life? And I told him I would still code as a hobby. I don't know what, I don't know how many hours, but I would still do something.
Yeah, I have some of my family members are like, "Why are you still working?" Because I don't need it financially. It's purely that I love doing all this stuff, right? And so the way I sort of speak to them about it is I say, if you got paid to wake up and play video games all day with your friends, would you do it? And it puts it into they're like, "Oh, okay, this is a fun thing that I'm like waking up and doing every day." It's not like I'm to them, because they're not programmers even, right? So to them, the computer is like this thing where you watch YouTube videos maybe, or like you fill out your time card or whatever, right? It's not this weird puzzly math thing that we're all playing with, right? So
Puzzle,
I'm gonna give
puzzle
it
is
to them in that context, they get it.
puzzle precise describes it really well. It's a really fun, hard puzzle.
Yeah.
I
That you're
have a
solving with friends too, right? So I've actually had a few auditors reach out to me and be like, can I work at a firm with you, or do you want to do this audit with me or whatever? Because what's happening is I think a lot of these people are getting burnt out from the fact that they're working totally solo, right? And so I think there's also like a social element to it. That was another thing I learned when I left Amazon is like the community is actually very, very important to me. Being a part of a community and having that social network where I'm like getting to hang out with my friends all day, every day, right?
definitely. I could imagine how, for example, I have friends in Romania that are also software engineers, and they're working at like local banks or just like very boring stuff where it's like there's no fun in that. But come to crypto, and this is amazing. These are people that they believe in, generally speaking, the same kind of like philosophies about life, about how we should be, very sovereign over our money and so on and so forth. And it's much more enjoyable, much more enjoyable.
I often think that like the actual sort of value of I think Bitcoin and Ethereum was like this mimetic aspect of it where it got everybody aligned around the same goals. And the actual technology is not necessarily fulfilling those goals in a very correct way, but it doesn't matter because it got everybody thinking in that. And so we'll eventually get there because there's a lot of people who complain are like, you know, the wealth distribution on these crypto platforms is like worse than than wealth distributions in regular society and whatever, right? So you can look at all these things and say, look, you guys are not solving any of the problems you say that you want to solve. Like SBF is another good example, right?
Oh,
It's all these opaque, fraudulent things going on in the crypto ecosystem, right? But we're all still working in that direction of like trying to achieve this goal. And I think eventually it will sort of like meme itself into existence in a very weird way.
Yeah, to some degree, for some reason unknown to me, it's the centralized and high P projects that get the most eyeballs, and it's the very beautiful technologies that are really decentralized that don't get as much eyeballs. I have a lot of friends that have an account on stuff like FTX. Like, I mean, look, to me, Binance, FTX, it's the same thing. Somebody holds your crypto. It's not your crypto, right? Philosophically, maybe Binance is more trustworthy. I can say that maybe, but it's still centralized. And same goes for Robinhood, same goes for Kraken, same goes for everything, right? I have a lot more friends that use that than friends that have a hard wallet. And I have to literally force them to just, please, just buy a ledger, buy a Trezor. I'm going to set it up for you. I'll show you how to, I'll help you out. And it's a hard job to onboard them. And I think that's really the big issue. But I think as we work towards it as an industry, more and more people are going to use them because they're going to be easier and easier to use. And actually, I've even tweeted about this last year. I was trying to move some money. I think I was trying to send somebody like $1,000 or $2,000 or something like that. Not a huge amount of money, right? And I tried to do it through the bank. And the bank starts asking, why are you sending the money? Who are you
Yeah.
sending the money to? All sorts of bullshit. And ultimately, I wasn't even able to send the money because they asked so many questions. And ultimately, they told me, yeah, but you can't even send it from like the bank. You have to go to the other bank because this bank is like, doesn't have a teller or whatever. And I'm like, what the fuck? I can literally just pull out my Trezor,
Hit a
bank,
button and it's sent. Yeah.
plug it in, type in the address, done, gone. 5 minutes, I just paid you. Amazing. The UX is so much better once you get to that onboarding with crypto.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember this was a couple years ago. I was getting gas in a different state and they blocked my card because they thought it was a fraudulent activity. And I just thought, this is crazy that they can just do this. The thing is that you just accept it because it's all you've ever known growing up. So you just think, oh, this is normal. The bank's trying to protect me or whatever, right? And then when you go into the crypto ecosystem, you realize the possibilities and how free you are able to transact
Yeah.
with others online. That you're like, okay, this is the horse and buggy or whatever, right? But it's hard to like until you get people onboarded, they don't see the light and they just
Yep.
think you guys are crazy over there. They hear about the hacks, they hear about the fraud, they hear about all this stuff. And so they think like this is too risky, right? This is actually, I mean, your point about people not custodying their own assets. Like, this is why I went to work at Robinhood, right? Because this is a problem that needs to be solved.
Yep.
Until it gets solved, everyone's going to keep holding their assets on either on like, Coinbase, Binance, whatever, FTX, or on their bank account.
Yeah. I love that Robinhood is doing that. I think it's a great initiative by a big company that more big companies should do stuff like that, non custodial.
Yeah, I just wish, like I said, there's a lot to be desired in that space. And me coming from a security perspective, I wish there was more like multi-sig sort of stuff going on, multi-party computation stuff going on, account recovery, this sort of stuff. I think is what is keeping people hesitant. Everyone says, okay, the user experience on non-custodial is bad or whatever, right? I think it's actually the risk of like, what happens if I lose my keys? What happens if I lose my wallet? What happens if I lose my phone, right? It's all that stuff is the reason why people aren't holding large sums of wealth in their wallets. So if you fix all those things and make people feel more comfortable custodying their own assets, then they're going to be more likely to do it.
I chuckled because I remember how my first hard wallet ended up in my jeans in the washing machine, fully destroyed.
Exactly.
I had to
Exactly.
recover mine. I consider myself a pretty responsible person, and still I still fucked up. So I totally see that point.
Exactly. Yep.
There's a lot of other subjects that I want to hit on. Um, how much time do you have left?
Oh, actually, I have to go in like 7 minutes. I have another meeting actually.
Okay, okay, we need to move fast then. Let
I didn't
me.
see that.
Okay. Um, let's do three more quick questions. I think you had, I'm not sure because I saw a tweet, but I didn't really dive deep into researching this about you. Did you have an ad tech startup? What's the story behind that?
Oh yeah, actually no, I did the seed round in the ad tech startup. So what happened is I think we talked about it. I don't remember if we went live or not by this point in the conversation, but I started a newsletter where I was interviewing open source developers, and the newsletter did quite well. It was growing, and but I was like sort of getting ready to sell it. Basically, what I was seeing is like there was going to be an economic slowdown like a year or so ago when the inflation was getting crazy. I knew Fed's going to have to raise rates. That's going to kill frivolous spending, which means my newsletter's going to die. So I decided I was going to sell it. And when I put it up for sale, I had quite a few buyers interested in buying the newsletter. And one of them was an ad tech startup where they were sort of trying to automate the process of having advertisers be able to advertise in these newsletters, because currently the process is very manual, where it's like, okay, we agree on a price. There's a bunch of emailing back and forth about the price and the click-through rate that you're expecting and all this other stuff. And then you send me the assets, and then I dump the assets into a draft, and then I send you the draft. And, so it's like, that's fine usually. But if you're trying to buy ads in bulk, if you're an advertiser trying to buy in like 10,000 newsletters, something like that, right? It's not scalable. You can't be doing that, right? And so these guys are sort of trying to automate that entire process. They wanted to buy my newsletter kind of as like a test, and then also like for them to sort of test the process of like advertising in the newsletters, but also as like an arm of potential growth or something like this, right? We didn't end up doing the deal together, but then they tried to hire me, and then that didn't work either. And by the end of it, I was like, can I do the seed round at least? Like, can I still like invest in you guys? And they were like, of course. And so, yeah, I signed a check. And
Okay, now I see. I thought you raised the funds.
no, I was actually the investor in that round. Which, by the way, I do seed rounds, right? So if anybody wants to DM me, if your idea is not bad, it has to be a good idea, or I'm not signing a check.
I was actually gonna ask you if you want to shill anything. Do you like, okay, one, if you guys need any sort of investment of something that is cool, just give a few like criteria of what you're looking for. Is it crypto? Is it
I
also
honestly, yeah, no, I actually don't have any. I will invest kind of in anything as long as I think that the founder is like going to succeed in their endeavor. Like, so in the case of this ad tech startup, the guy had started two prior ad tech startups and had successful exits. And so I was like, okay, this guy kind of knows what he's doing. He's not going to flop here. So I'm typically going to ask you a lot of questions about like business strategy and like what your background is and that sort of a thing. But yeah, I mean, it could be infrastructure, like, hosting infrastructure companies, crypto companies, ad tech. Like, I don't know anything about, I mean, yeah, I ran a newsletter, right? But I'm not an ad tech person, right? But if the business is compelling, I recently invested in a friend's, it's like a online sales course, but he was a very successful salesperson at a prior startup. And so that was the reason why I invested in the company. I don't know shit about sales, but if I believe in the founder, I'll totally back them. So yeah, I mean, any criteria, it doesn't matter. Just DM me and let's talk.
another question about your angel investing? Could you share a range of the checks that you're writing? How small are you willing to go? How big are you willing to go?
Yeah, I've done. I guess when we're speaking, purely about the C round, I'll do anything from 25K to 100K.
That's sizable. That's sizable.
Depends on my conviction.
I think that's very good. I think that's very sizable. There are grant programs that don't offer $100,000 to any one individual company,
If you're
and like,
good. Big disclaimer, man.
it's good.
I'm not going to send anybody a 100K check.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, if it's the right project, right? We only have 1 minute and a half, so we're not gonna be able to do all of the questions. So, what I would like to do is to invite you for a future
Sure.
uh, second chat, because I still have a few things that I want to talk about. Particularly, it was very interesting to me how you meet like other really cool people, like the Y Combinator CEO, or like I remember you mentioned you got a job by posting a course on Udemy, which I think might be a really cool story. So we have other stuff to talk about too that I'm really really curious about. But
Totally.
let's wrap it up because I hate when people are late to my meetings. So I don't want you to be late to your meeting.
Sure, sure. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, somebody will pitch you a DeFi derivatives idea, but let's get out. See you around. Yeah, no, really, it's like you got 30 seconds to hit the meeting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I thought you were going to turn off the going live. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
let's
Sounds
turn
good.
off. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 1, 2,